Hello and a very good evening to all those who are joining us on this News9 Facebook Live. And today we're going to talk about the fears of the second shutdown. I'm Pratibha. Do join us with your comments as well on what you think, whether shutdown or not, and whether this is something that the government should do. Do join us with your comments on what you think the government will have to do. So today I'm going to talk about the highlights of Prime Minister Modi's interactions with the chief ministers of the states that happened just now, just a while ago. Prime Minister Modi has also highlighted what the country is doing, our fight until now with coronavirus. And of course, the fears of the second lockdown still loom large because it has been reimposed in Chennai. So we're going to talk about that. Join us with all the comments that you have and your thoughts on that. A little while ago, Prime Minister Modi addressed the chief ministers of all the states, and while talking about the situation across the country, he said that India has done tremendously well. We have ensured that with the timely lockdown, we brought the total number of cases of coronavirus under control. He spoke about mortality rate in particular. He spoke about how in the other advanced countries, the mortality rate is much higher as compared to what it is in India, which is a victory for India. He said that the people around the world are also praising India in its fight for against COVID-19. So, while praising India's efforts, he also stressed on the fact that it is up to you and me and everybody across the country to ensure that we don't let our guard down, that we continue to follow the norms that have been put in place by the government. And if we follow these guidelines, that's the only way possible to defeat coronavirus. Now, a second lockdown, the fears of it have re-emerged after the lockdown was reimposed in Chennai. Until now, there were several speculations on whether lockdown would be reimposed or not. And in fact, in our Facebook Live as well, we've discussed the same, the possibilities of the same. It was just yesterday that the Karnataka Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa had also said that there is no question of another lockdown in Karnataka. But this also reminds us of a statement that the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister had also made just a few days ago. He said there is no question of lockdown being reimposed, even if the cases in Tamil Nadu are increasing. And yet, today, the announcement came in that the lockdown is going to be imposed, and across Chennai is going to be a very strict lockdown that will be imposed. And this time around, if at all that happens in the other states or perhaps in a few cities as well, then it is going to have a major impact. And this time around, the lockdown could have much bigger implications than it did in the first lockdown. We've already seen the kind of impact that the first lockdown had. We saw how people's lives had been affected. That was a sudden lockdown that had been imposed, because of which people across the country were affected. The migrant crisis, of course, being one of the things that had been spoken of extensively. But even otherwise, we've seen businesses, whether it's around our houses, across the country as well, several businesses have already shut down. Many more are also on the edge. They're on the brink of collapse. And now another shutdown could only mean that these businesses would lose the little hope that they have again. So this is the harsh reality that we need to face, that there's a possibility of a second lockdown, which is why it is up to people's social responsibility to ensure that they do everything they can and ensure that the cases don't spread rapidly. Now, during the lockdown as well, in terms of the cases that have been reported across the country, we've seen record hospitalizations in some of the states, especially the national capital in Delhi, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu. These are some of the worst affected regions. And even though the government knows very well that a lockdown again is going to be extremely tough, it is a measure that the government will look at if the cases are not under control, if the situation is not under control. If we give you Delhi's example, for instance, their healthcare system has already been overburdened. Now, if drastic steps are not taken in the national capital, things could go out of hand very soon. So, I'll also give you an example of the United States. Because of the lockdown, there was a record 44 million people who filed for unemployment. In India, there's no similar data available, and we don't have a system of people registering themselves for unemployment benefits. But we've seen the number of people who have been affected by the lockdown, and another imposition of the lockdown is only going to make things much worse. So this is a big worry, and it's not just closer home like we saw in Chennai what the situation was, because now a strict lockdown has been put in place. This is a method that has also been used in the other countries, and this had the lockdown being reimposed has been experimented by Hong Kong as well as Singapore as well. These are two of the places that were initially praised for the way it handled the coronavirus situation, after which the cases started increasing all of a sudden, and then there was no option but to reimpose a lockdown. But after reimposing lockdown, the situation came under control in these areas, and that's something that we can take heart from. But we also need to hope and ensure that we don't get into such a situation yet again, because even if people across the country are not affected, there would be millions who are going to be extremely affected by the lockdown and the impact on it as well. Tamil Nadu in particular, in a few cases, in a few of the places that have seen a big spurt in the number of cases that have been reported, the lockdown is extremely strict, just how it was in lockdown 1.0 across the country, which means only essential services are being provided. All the businesses are going to be shut. Even government offices, the central and the state government offices, are going to cut down to just 33% employees who are going to be working. Apart from that, all shops and businesses are going to be closed. Private institutions are going to be closed, and only essential supplies like groceries and milk and of course medicines would be provided to the people, and those are the shops that would be open, but all others would be closed. So, going by what the situation was in the first lockdown, we do know that it's going to be a very heavy price to pay, which is why we yet again need to stress on the need for people to have social responsibility. On an institutional level as well, it is for the government to ensure that all the guidelines that are in place are being imposed. In a few of the places, as we've seen, despite what the rules mandate, there are several places that are still violating these norms. They are not aware that one mistake from their side can cost us very dearly. One mistake being made and there could be a cluster of cases, and then it becomes extremely difficult to control the number of cases. So on one hand, of course, the government or the authorities need to ensure that the rules that have been put in place, the guidelines that have been given by the central government are imposed in a very strict manner across the state. This is one of the measures that need to be taken to ensure that we don't reimpose the lockdown in a much harsher manner. Apart from that, it is up to individual responsibility as well to ensure that we're doing our bit as well. No doubt avoiding any crowded places. This goes without saying. We've seen several incidents that have been reported as well, where functions are taking place and social distancing is thrown out of the wind. It's just not, whether it is VIP events or even smaller functions that are taking place, there are people attending assuming that now things are under control, or knowing that okay, the officials are not going to take any action. But it is cases like this that can bring the situation out of control completely, and this is why we need to be extremely careful. Individual responsibility comes in here. So ensuring that we're avoiding crowded places, ensuring that social distancing norms are followed everywhere, and of course the most important part of it being wearing face masks. In fact, several studies have shown that face masks are the only effective way that we have as of now to ensure that the situation does not get out of control. In cases of asymptomatic patients in particular, because they might not have the symptoms, it's very easy for them to spread it to the others unknowingly. They perhaps might not even be aware that they're COVID-19 positive because they're asymptomatic, they don't have symptoms, so they can spread it to the others very easily. And this is the reason why it very quickly spreads. It's one of the most fatal points of coronavirus, which makes it all the more important for us to be taking care of ourselves and for those who are around us. So face masks extremely important. Whenever you're stepping out, ensure that you carry face masks and you're wearing it in any public places. Ensure that any area around your house is disinfected. If you're working in your office, ensure that you are asking the officials there to ensure that it's disinfected completely. Sanitizers, another effective way to ensure that we're extremely careful and can avoid coronavirus. These are some of the known facts. These are some of the proven facts about countering coronavirus, and this is something that we can do on an individual level. Yes, there are a few responsibilities we are hoping from the government as well as the institutions, but apart from that, it is up to you and me and everyone across the country to ensure that we do our bit as well, because a second lockdown is something that we cannot afford. It is something that that is going to be extremely detrimental to not just the economy but people at large as well. Thank you so much for joining us in this session, and we'll join you again tomorrow. And take care and ensure you're at home, staying safe and at home.